here to speak to us today. And it's an honor for all of us to have you here. We have another speaker with us to join this session, Mr. Sudipto, who will be joining the panelists over here. We are getting the chairs arranged shortly, so please be patient. Right after this, we'll break for lunch. So if you have rats running around in your tummy, just wait a little more and enjoy this beautiful session. Thank you. Over to you, Kedar sir.
Thank you. Friends, we are very close to lunch. So, no nonsense talk. Just I want to say few things in the beginning. As writers, we know Europe, we know America, we know Latin America, but hardly we know what is being written in Nepal or what is there in Sri Lanka. Despite a historical sharing, suppose Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, we share the common thread of Buddhism. There is a common thread of Ramayana and Mahabharata narrative. Even within the country, suppose as a Odia writer, how much I know about Hindi writing, how much I know about Tamil, how much I know about Sinhalese. So that's the point that we are going to discuss. What's the trend in our neighborhood? How we see our neighbors. Starting with that, let me invite the first speaker, Daya Disanayake. I don't know again whether I pronounced your name in the correct way. Sri Lanka, very interesting land. Sinhalese, Tamil, and I'm sure there must be many other languages. So what is the trend of Sri Lankan literature and how do you present yourself as a Sri Lankan writer in India? So I think we should have very brief commentary. Then we can go for the second round, starting with Daya sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I don't consider myself a Sri Lankan writer. I consider myself a South Asian because we are one family together. And unfortunately, we have been divided geographically, politically, and linguistically with all these other regions. But I think what has happened is, in the past, we were closer to each other because in Sri Lanka, we had visitors from all over the country and we are very close to Kalinga because there are so many links with Kalinga and with Bangladesh, with Bengali, with West Bengal. So we are one family, and because here I can easily pass for an person from Bhubaneswar or from Odia. So we are all one family, and unfortunately, we have to now revive this situation. We have to get together. We have to cross the language barrier first. So till then, fortunately, we have English as a linked language. So let's try to share, because I know that very few people in India or even Nepal know about Sri Lankan literature, Sri Lankan people. That is because we have been alienated for so long, and let's try to see how we can put this right. I think that's the first step.
You say, you consider yourself as a South Asian writer, but Gurudev Tagore spoke about the Asian identity of literature, the whole Asian, and we hardly talk about that Asian identity. We are more comfortable to talk about colonial literature, post-colonial literature, and other, but we hardly explore the possibility to have a union of Asian nations, Asian lands actually. That's one question. And the second thing, I am going to Tulsi ji, Tulsi Diwasa ji. Because as I asked Mr. Disanayake, that what is the trend in Sri Lankan literature and how do you approach Nepali literature in an Asian perspective? What is the trend actually? How you see contemporary Nepali literature and how do you relate with the world? But sir, briefly, we should talk in a very brief.
Hello, thank you very much. It's very interesting here and very meaningful. The sense that we have been really making our friends aware of new trends, what we are really practicing in different parts of South Asia, right from Nepal to Sri Lanka. In the area of poetry, being a poet myself, as an individual, or even country-wise, we are different, sharing some of the commonality. What do we have in the area of different forms of literature? But being a poet myself, I would like to tell you, now Nepal is coming up in poetry with more Nepalese-ness than what we used to import earlier in the name of poetry from west, far east. Nepal is coming up in poetry through, in terms of both the structure and the content, differently. Our new poets and writers trying to communicate, though, from the poet's awareness, representing what Nepal is, experience both inside and outside, both head voice, heart voice. So we have been, Nepal is coming up now in the area of experimentation, in terms of poetry writing, in terms of representing what Nepalese are really thinking, feeling, practicing in the area, as I said, poetry. So what is that Nepaliness? How we really represent in Nepali poems? What makes Nepali poems Nepalese? That's more important to me. But it's more important than creation. We have to emphasize and give importance to creator, then only afterwards creation. We have trained to see our poets through their creation. Best, better, first introduce yourself, know your poets better, and then go to this creation, so that you can do a kind of poetic justice to a poet. This is what is true, I feel, not only in the case of Nepal, but in the case of whole South Asia. South Asia, the way that we have been coming up, awakening, practicing, or coming up new concept of poetry, what we used to earlier in the name of traditional forms of poetry, now is totally different. We have different way of life. So, and even concept, identity-wise, are different. To be different is very important in the area of creative areas of literature. Not to be together with, not like others, but to be different than others is more important. That is what our poets are coming up, and coming up as an individual, as a representative of Nepali creative writers. I think I say this much. And then trying to coming out with Nepaliness. And that Nepaliness is not that easy to conceptualize, because Nepal is a small country, but we are more than 135 different ethnic groups in Nepal living in different altitude of the high mountains. Out of 15 top mountains, 10 and 11 are there in Nepal. Right from the bottom of the hill and go to the top of the hill with the change of altitude will come across with different flora and fauna, different way of living. And it's very interesting. If you just climb one mountain there in Nepal and start your journey from the bottom of the hill, go to the top of the hill with the change of altitude, you will come across different flora and fauna, different way of life, different, the way that different social structures and different practice, this is all different in one mountain. And that you can generalize from the Tarai hills to the high mountains in Nepal. And that's more important to understand Nepali poetic mentality and poetic way of communication and poetic way of expressing Nepal to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diwasa. This is very interesting. When you are talking about the high mountain population, suppose in Odisha, every fourth Odia is a tribal, and we have 64 tribal groups in Odisha only. And every tribal group have their own language, they have their own literature, maybe oral, and somewhere it is written. Suppose in Kuri and Santali, they have a wonderful range of written literature. And we don't consider them as writers, we don't consider them as a part of so-called mainstream. Now going to Mr. Belangi. Yeah.
I think now, as you said, there are about 60 ethnic groups in 64. We have more than 35, 140 ethnic groups in Nepal. And then Nepal is not supposed to be represented by one ethnic group or one kind of it. We have been trying to really include all of them and come up with your kind of way of. That's why we have been started even folklore studies. And I'm the president of the Nepali Folklore Society. And we have been organizing every year both poetry reading session and at the same time presenting lot of different papers. And people are coming from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, all this, even from Canada, America, Europe, even Japan, all they are coming. And that is really helping to really understand our kind of concept of poetic aesthetics and our way of approach towards our poetry. So first, not to go to others, go inside to understand your own poetry, concept of poetry, make use of poetry, and even the concept of poetic aesthetics, what we have with us.
Thank you, sir. So now going to Mr. Mahendra Malangi. Mr. Mahendra Malangi is a very reputed, renowned Maithili writer, one of the towering personality in Maithili. Yesterday he was talking about the relationship between Odisha and Maithili, Odia language and Maithili language. So, in a way we are closer to each other. There are dialogues between two languages since last so many years, since last so many centuries. But we are yet to know what is being written in Maithili, or a Maithili writer hardly know what is being written in Odia. So now it's up to you, sir, to talk about Maithili, what's the contemporary trend and how you see Maithili literature today.
पहले जब मैं साहित्य लिखना शुरू किया और साहित्य और इतिहास भी पढ़ना शुरू किया और साहित्य भी लिखना शुरू किया, तो उसमें मुझे लगा कि इतिहास में केवल नाम जो है वह सत्य है और घटना बिल्कुल असत्य है।
क्या बात, बहुत गहरी बात।
इसके बाद साहित्य में देखा कि नाम असत्य है और घटना सत्य है। इसका एग्जाम्पल हम देना चाहेंगे। राज दरबार का या राजा का जब संहार हुआ था नेपाल में वीरेंद्र का, तो संपूर्ण जवाबदेही किस पर आ गया था? युवराज पर, कि युवराज ने ऐसा संहार किया है। वो किसी से उनका प्रेम था, उसमें राजा सहमति नहीं थे और इसलिए उन्होंने मार दिया। अब सवाल ये उठता है कि 45 किलो का वो अस्त्र था और युवराज 45 किलो का अस्त्र उठा सकता था? नहीं। वो मार सकता था? नहीं। लेकिन इतिहास में आ गया कि ऐसे ऐसे युवराज ने मार दिया। मुझे कोई साहित्य वहां देखने को नहीं मिला कि इस बात को उजागर करता कि युवराज ने नहीं मारा था। तो इस तरह देखते हैं कि घटना सही हो जाता है। जो घट रहा है अभी घटना, उसमें यह भी हम लोग देखते हैं कि चुपके 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 हम रह जाते हैं। यहाँ किंग महल की एक कविता मुझे याद आती है। आकाश को तीरे मीरे तारा, म गन न सकदै न, मन को कूड़ो मुख मां ले आई, म भन न सकदै न। मतलब आकाश में इतना तारा है, उसको हम गन नहीं सकते हैं, गिन नहीं सकते हैं, लेकिन मेरे हृदय में जो बात है उस बात को मैं व्यक्त नहीं कर सकता हूं। वही स्थिति आजकल हम लोगों का जो लेखक है उनका हो गया है। ये राजनीति और इसका जवाबदेह ये पार्टी पॉलिटिक्स जो है वो है। अब नेपाल में क्या घटना घट रहा है, इंडिया में क्या घटना घट रहा है, ये एक्यूरेट हम नहीं समझ पाते हैं। तो इस तरह मुझे लगता है कि यह दुरुस्त करना होगा। माया मोह को छोड़ना होगा, पार्टी पॉलिटिक्स को छोड़ना होगा। पार्टी पॉलिटिक्स को जब तक हम नहीं छोड़ेंगे तब तक हम उस सार्थक स्थिति पर नहीं पहुंच पाते हैं। यहाँ हिंदू मुसलमान की बहुत बातें हो रही है, लेकिन चीन में क्या हो रहा है अभी तक मुझे देखने में नहीं मिला है कि उनकी वेदना क्या है, और किसी ने नहीं लिखा। ये किसकी कमजोरी है? साहित्यकारों की कमजोरी है। इस कमजोरी को मुझे दूर करना है। वैसे पड़ोसी देश के लिए अब पड़ोसी देश सब हो गया है। मेरे मित्र का एक कविता संग्रह है, उसका नाम है पेन ड्राइव में पृथ्वी, कि संपूर्ण पृथ्वी जो है वो एक पेन ड्राइव में समाप्त हो गया है। यहाँ नरसंहार जो हो रहा है रूस में रूस कर रहा है, तो जब देखते हैं तो कांप जाते हैं कि अरे बाबा क्या हो गया है। एक बच्चे लोग सड़क पर रेंग रहे हैं और उसको डर है कि कब न ये कर दे, लेकिन वो नहीं आ रहा है जिस ढंग से आना चाहिए। ज़ेलेंस्की को अपने सत्ता की भूख है, इसलिए मरता है तो मरो। क्या उसके बारे में कभी लिखा गया है? सरदार जो लोग हैं वो चावसी दे रहे हैं कि ऐसा करो, मरो तुम। तो इस तरह साहित्य जो है वो मौन हो गया है। इस मौन को हमें तोड़ना होगा, और जब तक हम इस मौन को नहीं तोड़ेंगे तब तक साहित्य की जो गरिमा है उस गरिमा को हम बरकरार नहीं रखेंगे। और अंत में मैं एक ही बात कहूँगा, कहना तो चाहता हूँ बहुत कुछ, लेकिन मुझे गाड़ी पकड़नी है और हम इन लोगों से माफ़ी मांग करके बड़ा दुख के साथ मैं माफ़ी मांगता हूँ कि मुझे जाने की अनुमति दी जाए।
All right, sir. Thank you. Now I am bringing a very interesting panelist, असगर वजाहत जी. Sir, आपको पता नहीं, लेकिन I can say that I am a fan of you. तो आप उड़िया शायद ना जाने, लेकिन हमको आपकी रचनाएं याद है, हम पढ़ते हैं आपको। तो आपको एक सवाल है मेरा कि जब हम बातें करते हैं नेबरहुड की, तो एक तो है कि जो नेबर है वो दुश्मन बन गए हैं सबके सब, वी आर फाइटिंग विथ ईच अदर। एक जो डायलॉग था कभी कभार एक दूसरी तरफ जो ट्रैक टू डायलॉग था वो भी खत्म हो गया कहीं ना कहीं। तो उसी ये जो पॉलिटिकल तनाव के बीच हाउ डू यू सी द आइडेंटिटी ऑफ एन एशियन लिटरेचर, द आइडेंटिटी ऑफ एशियन लिटरेचर, जो टैगोर बार बार वही दोहराते रहे कि वी हैव टू क्रिएट एन एशियन आइडेंटिटी फॉर आवर लिटरेचर। तो आप कैसे देखते हैं इसको?
दोस्तों नमस्ते। बहुत महत्वपूर्ण विषय है कि आपका पड़ोस, आपका नेबरहुड और आपका साहित्य, और दोनों के बीच
So
क्या
Daya,
संबंध?
Dayaji is asking, can you speak in English a bit so that he can?
Well, I can try to speak in English, but usually I speak in Hindi. But I will speak in Hindi, and then I will, I can say key words, I mean, key sentences in English also, so that everybody will understand. है ना? देखिए, ये हमारा नेबरहुड और लिटरेचर, इसकी रिलेशनशिप और इसकी इम्पोर्टेंस क्या है कि हमारा एशियन जो साहित्य है वो हमेशा कम्युनिटी साहित्य रहा है। Our literature was always a literature of our community. It was not, only for the intellectuals and for the learned people, but it was for common people also. जो गली में चल रहा है आदमी, वो भी लिटरेचर को पढ़ता और सुनता और समझता है, उसके भी संस्कार बनते हैं। मैं I'll give you example that Urdu poet Mir Taqi Mir, this 18th century poet, he was so popular that when the traders used to go from North India to South India, then the people of South India used to ask that have you brought, I mean, you have brought everything to sell here, but did you bring new poetry of Mir also? आप मीर की ताजा गजल भी लाए हैं अपने सामान के साथ. So the importance, the कम्युनिटी में जो लिटरेचर का इम्पोर्टेंस थी वो ये थी कि एवरीबडी इन द सोसाइटी, नेबरहुड जिसको आप कह सकते हो, वो लिटरेचर के लिए वो जाते थे. Probably the print media has played some very important role also, but it has limited the reach of literature. Oral traditions were much more, stronger and bigger and much more effective to transmit literature to common people, to your community. Now that is not the scene. अब तो ये है कि किताब छपी है, you go and buy a book, you read it or you don't read it, nothing. लेकिन literature at one time was part of our life. So we should try to encourage the kind of oral literature. Oral literature. देखो, I was invited to a village to recite a story. तो अब मैंने ये सोचा कि उनको मैं कोई किताब से कहानी सुनाऊंगा. It will, I mean, they will not be able to appreciate it, the very traditional story. जो शॉर्ट स्टोरी फॉर्मेट है हमारा, वो बिल्कुल ब्रिटिश है, यूरोपियन फॉर्मेट है. हमारा जो है ओरल ट्रेडिशन की कहानी है, हमारी पंचतंत्रा की स्टोरी है, हमारी जो है वो ऐसी कहानियां हैं विच हैव very symbolic stories which a common person can understand. अच्छा, एक बात और भी इम्पोर्टेंट है. हम ये समझते हैं कि जो हमारा कॉमन मैन है, he will not be able to understand the intricacies of good literature. लेकिन ये हमारी भूल है. It is our mistake. कॉमन जो आदमी है, जो आपका नेबरहुड है, उसको बहुत अच्छी लिटरेचर की समझ है, क्योंकि वो फोक समझता है. एंड फोक इज द हाईएस्ट, I mean, in my opinion, folk is the highest form of literature, क्योंकि it survived for centuries and centuries. That's why I call it the highest form of literature. तो हमको ये नहीं सोचना चाहिए कि भाई कॉमन मैन तो समझ नहीं पाएगा, उसके हम क्यों जाएंगे उसके पास. सेकेंडली, अब एक और था टेक का. I was talking about giving and then I'm talking about taking. See, I give you an example. I was in the US long back and I found some poems by Red Indians. I brought those poems and showed it to our very important, distinguished poet at that time, Raghuveer Sahai. And I asked him that, can you translate it into Hindi? These are very good poems. He read those poems and he said that no, it is just impossible to translate it. I said, why? He said that the words are very simple. If I will translate it in my words, in Hindi, then the simplicity of words cannot impress anybody, cannot give any feeling to anybody. But in a tribal society, these words carry different meaning. In tribal society, these words carry different meaning. So for them, it may be very good poetry, not for us. इसी तरह से one translator, good translator of Hindi literature into English, said that he can translate good Hindi poetry into English. So I told him that sometime it may not be possible. So he said that you give me just 2 lines and I will show you how to translate it into English. तो एक गीत है, गीत निरालक, बांधो न नाव इस ठाव बंधु, बांधो न नाव सारा गांव बंधु. These words are above their meaning. These words are above their meaning. तो क्या है कि नेबरहुड के लिटरेचर का ट्रांसलेशन और उनको लेना और उनको अप्रिशिएट करना इज ऑल्सो अ डिफिकल्ट वर्क. इट इज नॉट इजी. So this topic is very interesting. There are so many aspects we can talk about, but and I think that the other friends will talk about the other aspects. And I'm very thankful to you for giving me time to speak on this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asghar Saab. Now coming to Amanji. Sorry? Sudipto. That's okay, sorry, because I couldn't find the name actually. So how do you see that? The way we are discussing, Asghar Saab was also talking about the presence of tribal literature, and do you think that we have enough space to interact, or is there a space where we can dialogue, where we can have dialogue as Indian languages?
Hello. Yes, I believe when Asghar ji actually made a point that translating, neighborhood languages might be tough, right? And also I heard Daya ji talking about Sri Lankan literature, right? And interestingly, our ancient literature in India, actually there was no Sri Lanka, there was no Pakistan, there was no Nepal, right? I mean, if you see the Mahabharata, right? Sort of, all place names, all cultures, all traditions have been cited from like all across the Indian subcontinent, right? And that's, I mean, I had the privilege of reading Mahavamsa. So Mahavamsa, I mean, if I may, say, but you may correct me. So Mahavamsa, was written sometime in, I think, 5th century AD, right? Or something like that. And it has a chronicle of a lot of Indian kings also, right? And two historical things. I mean, one is Raj Tarangini, written, by Kalhana in Sanskrit in Kashmir, and Mahavamsa, which is written in Pali. These two books, right? I mean, like coming from two distant parts of India, but actually they talk about entire Indian subcontinent, right? So, dialogues were there in the past. I mean, and as like that, the topic of Gurudev, I mean, Rabindranath Tagore have come up, right? I mean, number of times. So, in fact, he got the idea from in Japan is called Okakura. Like Okakura was, was fascinated by Swami Vivekananda, and he came to Calcutta, and then actually Vivekananda and the sister Nivedita and the entire Tagore family were so inspired by him that they adopted his idea of a pan-Asian, civilization, because he believed that, like the, Asian civilization, right? I mean, where we have China, India, Japan, right? I mean, these three entities, they, form a very composite group. And I think Tagore picked up from that, right? So I believe, dialogues were there. In ancient literature, it was all of dialogues between the entire Indian subcontinent. But baad mein kabhi, I believe, due to political reasons, right? I mean, now we have Pakistan, right? Incidentally, the mother of all, the first book written by mankind, which is Rig Veda, which is also considered to be one of a very, like emotional thing for Indians, right? The entire Rig Veda was composed in Pakistan. I mean, like Swat Valley, which is now a hotspot of a lot of terrorism, right? So that has been the place where, the earliest the book of mankind was written. So I think, in the last many 100 years, we lost the dialogue. I believe, yes, I totally, appreciate the point that dialogues were there and dialogue should be there. And the entire Indian subcontinent had literature which had very commonality. So I believe, yes, it's our responsibility, the new generation, right, to to bring up the dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhatuji. So finally, it's time for Ramaji to sum up, actually, and briefly. So Ramaji, I know when you start, you have to speak a lot, but खाना खाने का जाना है, तो इस टॉपिक पर जितना कम बोला जाए, अच्छा है.
अव्वल तो एक बहुत जरूरी सब्जेक्ट को इस तरह निपटाना नहीं चाहिए. अगर हमें यही नहीं मालूम कि हमारे पड़ोस के देश में क्या लिखा जा रहा है, आप किस एशियन आइडेंटिटी की बात करते हैं. मैं तो उस युग की बेटी हूं जहां नेम के एक धारणा यहां बनाई गई कि आप न्यूज से लेके इंफॉर्मेशन से लेके पूरे आसियान राष्ट्र उसमें शामिल हों. एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट जो हमारे प्यारे प्यारे लेखकों ने बड़े बड़े गहन आवाज में धीरे धीरे बोल दिया अंग्रेजी में, जिस बात पर आप सबको जानना चाहिए कि इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड क्या है. मैं ये कहती हूं कि मुझे अपने हर पड़ोस देश की खबर है कि इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड ऑफ लिटरेचर क्या है वहां. इसलिए नहीं कि मैं बहुत पढ़ती हूं, इसलिए नहीं कि मुझे श्रीलंका की लैंग्वेज आती है, कि मुझे भूटान की आती है, कि मुझे नेपाल की आती है, कि मुझे अफगानिस्तान की आती है. लेकिन एक चीज है जिसको अंधा भी देख सकता है कि पिछले 75 सालों में सारे के सारे पड़ोसी राष्ट्र दरक गए हैं. एक दरार आई है आर्थिक रूप से, मौलिक रूप से, मानसिक रूप से. तमाम युवा उतने ही दबे हुए हैं जितने हमारे यहाँ. मैं आपको बहुत छोटा सा उदाहरण देती हूँ क्योंकि मुझे रूखे सूखे वक्तव्य अच्छे नहीं लगते. मैं कहना चाहती हूँ जब मिसेस गांधी ने इमरजेंसी लागू की थी तो मैंने बड़े युवा होने के नाते एक बड़ी जोरदार कविता लिखी थी. उसकी 4 लाइनें बोलती हूँ. कविता कब लिखी, कल कैसे काम आई, ये देखिए आप. मैंने तब लिखा था, एक आंधी सी उठी है आग के शोले उठाती, जल गया आकाश सारा इस सिरे से उस तरह तक, ओठ पर ताले जुड़े हैं, शब्द बेघर डोलते हैं, बोलते डरते हैं लोग, पहले सब कुछ तोलते हैं, एक लकड़ी सी जली है और धुआं सा उठा है. एक लकड़ी सी जली और धुआं सा उठा है, जल गया मधुमास सारा इस सिरे से उस सिरे तक. मुझे मिसेस गांधी ने जेल नहीं दी. कल उस लड़की नेहा सिंह ने इतना ही कहा, यूपी में काबा, लड़की को पुलिस का नोटिस मिल गया. ये नई जनरेशन का साहित्य है जहां कलम आपकी विद्रोह के पास भी नहीं पटक पाएगी, लिख भी नहीं पाएगी. नया कैसे लिखेगी, क्योंकि लिखने दिया जाएगा नहीं. तो 75 सालों में इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड्स में पाकिस्तान हमारी जगह आ गया. वहां खुल के शायर बोल रहे हैं और कोई फांसी नहीं चढ़ाया जा रहा. हमारे यहां उल्टा हो गया. नेपाल में खुल के बोले. इतनी सरकारें वहां गिरी हैं कि इतनी तो शायद मेरे पास उतने रंग के कपड़े भी नहीं होंगे जितने नेपाल में सरकारें गिरी हैं. मैं अपनी साड़ी बदलूं से पहले नेपाल में सरकार गिर जाती है. लेकिन फिर भी वहां साहित्य वहां नहीं पहुंच पाया. उस गांव जिसकी जिक्र कर रहे हैं उस रूरल एरिया तक नहीं आया. आया तो क्या आया, लोकगीत आए. उन लोकगीतों में अलग साहित्य निकल रहा है. वो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड ऑफ लिटरेचर है. वो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड ऑफ श्रीलंका का भी है. वो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड जहां देखते देखते 2 धड़े आधे इधर हो गए, आधे हो गए, तमिल इधर, श्रीलंकाई उधर, और फिर एक आग उधर लग गई. वहां क्या लिटरेचर लिखा जा रहा है. जब रोजगार नहीं होगा, पेट पर लात पड़ेगी, सरकार नहीं होगा, जब आपको लिटरेचर को देख के परखने वाला नहीं होगा, लिटरेचर आप कॉलेज स्कूल तक में नहीं ले जाएंगे, तो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड इज ओनली वन, मिस्टर दिसानायके, एंड दैट इज एवरीबडी इज फीलिंग ऑप्रेस्ड फ्रॉम श्रीलंका to Bhutan to Hong Kong. I will say because I was with BBC London for 10 good years. हांगकांग मेरे सामने चाइना के हाथ पाया तो दर्द हांगकांग कौन जानेगा. जो उसने कभी सपना ही नहीं देखा था, सोचा मैं अंग्रेजी पैदा हुआ हूं, वहां चाइना घुस गया. एक पूरी की पूरी नस्ल अलग हो गई. जो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड है, दे आर ऑल Our writing, I would say, without rhythm, but full of operation, full of revolution, literature, and that I can feel from, because I understand Urdu very well. I can't read and write. तो मैं एक छोटी सी आपको बात सुनाना चाहती हूँ, क्योंकि मैं अच्छे सुर में आपको खाने पे जाना चाहते। एक छोटी सी मैंने कविता लिखी थी। पाकिस्तान मेरा फेसबुक है, एंड आई हैव अ वेरी बिग फॉलोइंग। तो उसमें लोग लिखते हैं, बहुत छोटी नज़्म है, सिर्फ आपको इसलिए समर्पित करती हूँ कि अगर प्यार की बात हो, समझदारी की बातें हो, तो आप पाकिस्तान क्या, पता नहीं किस किस मुल्क तक बात कर सकते हैं। क्या इंडोनेशिया, इज इंडोनेशिया नॉट सफरिंग? वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट एशियन कंट्रीज। इज बर्मा नॉट सफरिंग? मेरे सामने ही उसको सूक्यू को उन्होंने जेल में डाला। मैं कहना ये चाहती हूं कि दर्द दिल 75 सालों में एशिया का एक है, इसलिए राइटिंग का स्तर भी एक है। तो मैंने बात की थी नीले फूल की, बस इसके बाद में बात कर बंद कर दे। ये मैं बोल रही हूं, मैंने ये कहा अपने फेसबुक में कि मैंने श्रीनगर में, अगेन वेरी सप्रेस्ड स्टेट, हैज इट्स ओन जख्म, तो उसकी दरगाह है एक जिसपे मेरी फिल्म थी, विच इज वन एन अवार्ड। उसकी छत पर आइरिस के फूल खिलते हैं। अब छत पर आइरिस के फूल अपने आप खिलते हैं मार्च के महीने में। अभी तो मैंने उस पर एक कविता लिखी। इस पर पाकिस्तान से 1000 लोगों का मेरे पास रिएक्शन आया है, और वो ये पीस है जिसकी चाह है। ये है, ओ शगुफे आइरिस नीले रहे हमसे तो तुम अच्छे, ओ शगुफे आइरिस नीले रहे हमसे तो तुम अच्छे, खिले बैठे हो इतरा कर रूहानी आस्थानों पर, खिले बैठे हो इतरा कर रूहानी आस्थानों पर, कि जैसे झूमती लतरें खुशी के शामियानों पर। ओ शगुफे आइरिस नीले सिखा दे हमको भी नगमा जो तू सदियों से गाता है, कि तुझसे सीख लें हम भी जिया ऐसे भी जाता है। वो आस्थाना हो या कब्रिस्तान, वो फूल कब्र पे भी लगाया जाता है। तो ये सारी, ये 4 लाइनें हैं बस। वो आस्थाना हो या कब्रिस्तान हो, मजार पोश हो या आइरिस नाम हो, फर्क पड़ता नहीं कुछ भी जब खिलना ही उसका काम हो। कि तेरी भीनी सी एक खुशबू समूले सांस में भर के, तबे मिट्टी के भीतर जब खिले अंबर को मुंह करके। ये सबकी इच्छा है, हर नई जनरेशन की, जो अब उठाएगा मशाल, जो अब उठाएगा कलम, जो अब लिखेगा मिस्टर दिसनायके's country or in your country. Every single नौजवान young writer wants freedom of speech, freedom of pen, and to be understood by the people who are sitting on the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramaji. Actually, Mr. Disanayake wanted to add something, but I think we have sort of time, or so
We can conclude it
Yeah,
in 2
Mr.
minutes. Yeah.
just 1 or 2 minutes that what you wanted to add.
So, if I am to talk about the Sri Lankan literature, I think I'll need at least 2 or 3 hours. But just to sum up, our literature started around the 2nd century BC. There are the rock inscriptions written in verse in Prakrit or Brahmi, and from then on we have written in Sinhala, in Pali, in Sanskrit, in Tamil, and then in English. A Sanskrit poem was written in the 9th century by a Sri Lankan king Kumaradasa, Janaki Harana, the Ramayana version. But what I want to try to say is, as I started earlier, we have to overcome the language barrier. How did we overcome it in the past? Because one of the earliest traders from Kalinga to Sri Lanka were Tapassu and Ballukar. They built a Keshatupa in Sri Lanka. So how did they communicate with the people in Sri Lanka? How did they overcome the language barrier? How did the words of the Buddha be conveyed to people there? So we have to see how they broke down the language barrier. But today we can do it in cyberspace. So I have been thinking about, we have to think of literature in cyberspace, where we can overcome the language barrier. Then only we can reach what Rabindranath Tagore called Vishwa Sahitya. But we can do it at least around SARC. We have the SARC Cultural Center. And if all the countries in the SARC region, if they put pressure on the cultural center, SARC Cultural Center, we can bring all this together. We can bring the languages, we can translate them to other languages, and we can bring them together. The facility is there, but we have to use it. We have to put pressure on the SARC Center to overcome all these barriers, and that is how our neighborhood can be one family. Right. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Disanayake. Just I want to conclude with one or two lines actually. One is that, when we are discussing about South Asian literature, there is a common sharing between all the languages, all the regions. And another very good example is, you see, he was talking about Mahabhansam and Tapasru and others. You see, Padmavat. When Malik Muhammad Jaisi started writing Padmavat, at least there are two chapters, this Bovita Khanda and this Gajpati, and how vividly he described making of sheep, and how vividly he described the Odishan culture. And after, you see, you imagine the time of Malik Muhammad Jaisi and imagine the time of today. We have better communication. What Mr. Disanayake is saying, we are in a cyberspace, but the dialogue and sharing has come down. That's the problem actually. So somewhere there must be a space where at least we can share, we can interact, and we can create an identity for world literature, truly a world literature, not a literature which is defined by political borders only. And what you are talking, Ramaji, everybody is suffering. At least I am the person here who is sitting with 78 FIRs against myself in my name. So everybody is suffering. So everybody is a part of the struggle in this country actually. So, but that's the part of life. That's the part of literature. Thank you very much, Mr. Asghar Wajahat, Tulsi Diwasa ji, Ramaji, Mr. Disanayake ji, and so Sudipta ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Kedar sir as well for coming here and moderating the session so well, for wonderful insights. And I think we are closing this session with a brilliant idea in the making of how we can create a platform that caters to the need of world literature in one place and all different languages coming together that we can all relish. So thank you so much for the wonderful session. And I hope all of us can create something like that. We'll get the group photo done. After this, we'll break for lunch. The lunch is on the first floor, where we had the lunch yesterday. You can ask someone to guide you there. And if you do not have food coupons, please go and speak to Mr. Ashutosh. He'll be right there in the hall. I request everyone to get the group photo done if it's not done yet. Yeah.